So unless you've been living under a rock, you've probably heard of this term James Lindsay came up with called the woke right. And he uses it as a derogatory term against the DR. They used to just call us Nazis, but these names lose all their sting over time, and so they have to keep inventing new ones. What does he mean by woke right? You'd think it would be arguing for mass immigration from the right, or drag queen story hour from the right, or DEI, but argued from the right. But that's not who we are. We are critics of liberalism, and that's what he is. He's a classical liberal. And so this is how it has to be. They can't just, attack our arguments. They have to come up with some term to make you taboo. So I thought I would tell you all the super duper dangerous insider secrets that I learned in my 5 years of being on the DR. And the best way to frame these is by showing the difference between our stance and the mainstream conservative stance or the liberal stance. According to James Lindsay, being woke is waking up to how power actually works, which that's a very vague definition, and that's how he manages to fit the right into this new definition of woke. So I thought I would go through some of the differences between mainstream conservatism, which apparently James Lindsay has no issues with, and this new faction of the right that he's terrified of, which he's calling woke right. Well, I learned that race is actually important, and that you ignore it at your own peril. You might not see race, but race definitely sees you. Every racial group, but whites, are allowed to advocate on behalf of their own people. They're even allowed to be proud of who they are. But not whites. That's dangerous. I learned that demographics are destiny, that race and IQ are intrinsically linked, and that no matter how much liberalism tries to convince us otherwise, stereotypes are there for a reason. They're how our lizard brain fills in the gaps even when we don't have all the information yet. And then there's civil rights. Boomers love civil rights. This is one aspect where liberalism has infused the mainstream conservative party so much. When vaccines were forced on us, oh my God, it was the end of the world. But when black kids were forced on us in schools at the end of a gun, that is to say, our constitutional freedom of association was ended at the barrel of a gun, well, the boomers are pretty quiet about that one. For being one big melting pot, America has always been self-segregated. Different communities of people seem to prefer to live amongst their own. And most people in the U.S. unconsciously spend every waking moment trying to escape the consequences of the Civil Rights Act. Disparate impact has been around for 50 years, and it's just as woke as anything currently on offer from the left. Acknowledging any one of these realities makes us woke, apparently. As Devin Stack said, an American can't just be a random person in the world who hasn't been hired yet. America is not an economic zone, and its people are not economic units. Americans are not little walking annuities who you can endlessly manipulate and shuffle around. Americans are a people with a distinct history and heritage and culture, and it's not some strip mall built on magic dirt where if a random brown person from Calcutta or Guatemala steps foot here, they just magically become an American. America is more than its GDP, and the vision for the future needs to be more than deregulating the economy so we can advance technologically and economically to infinity. We are more than a tax base to spread our wealth to the entire world. And this is where we are nationalist versus the globalist perspective. We have this crazy far-right belief, oh my God, we're extremists, where we believe that our leaders, whether that's politicians or CEOs, should place America first on their list of priorities. And for that, you get called all sorts of names. During the H-1B debate, I saw somebody say, oh, you're advocating for hiring just a specific group of people over the best person for the job? Meaning, hire an American versus a foreigner? Sounds like DEI to me. Well, these people are retarded. And if going against that retardation makes me woke right, well, then I guess I'm woke. When you get down to the nitty-gritty of so many of the issues we face in this country, autonomy seems to be the lowest common denominator. For my entire life, The conservative position was one of individualism, where a sort of stoic figure and perfect moral compass resides in every person, and they do mean every single person, and is guided by the principles of the Founding Fathers, and thus are able to act as freely as they wish. Let's take a quote by Alexander Hamilton for an example here. "Upon this natural law depend the natural rights of mankind. The Supreme Being gave existence to man, together with the means of preserving and beautifying that existence. He endowed him with rational faculties, by the help of which to discern and pursue such things as were consistent with his duty and interest, and invested him with an inviolable right to personal liberty and personal safety. Hence," he's saying, because God gave us these rights, "in a state of nature, no man had any moral power to deprive another of his life, limbs, property, or liberty, nor the least authority to command or extract obedience from him. To usurp dominion of a people and their own despot, or to grasp at a more extensive power than they are willing to entrust, is to violate that law of nature which gives every man a right to his personal liberty, and can therefore confer no obligation to obedience." The fetishization of these principles by conservatives and the bastardization of them by leftists has resulted in these people gladly destroying their own country in cultist devotion over something like the free market, or the free movement of labor, or freedom of speech, or these vague notions of liberty. As Ted Kaczynski said, freedom is an abstraction that means different things to different people. These people will kill and die for the freedoms from and the freedoms to. Every barstool conservative will say something along the lines of, "Well, as long as they're not hurting other people, what do I care?" All these freedoms sound good on paper, but they have been exploited to ruin our country. We're literally living under some kind of warped and quasi-satanic do-as-thou-wilt attitude where every action becomes permissible, no matter how destructive it is. If I'm allowed to hire non-citizens and pay them 25% less than the average wage, well then guess who's going to hire more illegals? And David French says that Drag Queen Story Hour is a blessing of liberty. They have the freedom to do that, and you have the freedom not to attend. And let's just all bask in this hot tub of awesome freedom. This is what America has become now. We're dealing with the consequences of autonomy at scale. All the hypotheticals supporting this line of thinking involve just a few edge cases, but the moment it hits reality and the entire population, it falls apart, and there's never an answer for it if the majority chooses the insane option. So what if a gay couple wants to get married? Well, that gets turned into 25% of Gen Z being some kind of LGBT. We're being plundered by people who hate us, and they're abusing our freedoms to do so. Like Elon Musk, he's a believer in all these freedoms, which is why he got pushback, about the H-1B issue, and his first reaction was, well, you can take a big step back and go yourself in the face. This is Elon's position, as well as Vivek's, because they think like Ben Shapiro. Well, who are we to step into the free market and regulate its autonomy for the betterment of our people? Sounds a bit illiberal to me.
So would you, Tucker Carlson, be in favor of restrictions on the ability of trucking companies to use this sort of technology specifically to, sort of artificially maintain the number of jobs that are available in the trucking industry?
Are you joking? In a second. In a second. In other words, if I were president, when I say to DOT, to Department of Transportation, we're not letting driverless trucks on the road, period. Why? Really simple. Driving for a living is the single most common job for high school educated men in this country, in all 50 states. By the way, that's the same group whose wages have gone down by 11% over the past 30 years. The social cost of eliminating their jobs in a 10-year span, 5-year span, 30-year span is so high that it's not sustainable. So the greater good is protecting your citizens.
Autonomy has to be balanced with its effect on families, communities, and the nation. This is why Tucker laughs at what Ben Shapiro thought was a valid argument. The greater good is protecting your citizens, with the implication being that some autonomy has to be taken away to do so. Like, I enjoyed Sam Hyde's video to Elon, but he was way more forgiving than me. I mean, if this is your attitude, F yourself in the face, well, then your usefulness to us is definitely over. These are the people who we were told by some that, the tech people, they value competence over everything. And then what do the moment they get in? They're seeking for that competence in India rather than here at home. And that's ridiculous. Should American companies be free to import foreign labor with the intent to replace its native population from the workforce? Absolutely not. It's laughable. The same with transgenderism, DEI, feminism, civil rights, and anything else liberated from the evil restrictions that were holding this whole thing together perfectly fine not that long ago. The Daily Wire, Fox News, BoomerCon conception of government is a total devotion to civic nationalism. They still believe the Constitution is the ruling law of the land that everyone is bound to. They believe in democracy, or constitutional republics, and that we the people are the owners of this country. I'm a shareholder in this country. Well, if that delusion hasn't been shattered for you over the last 10 years, you ain't gonna make it. It is so beyond obvious that the deep state or corporate lobbying or foreign interests have completely stripped the government of any pretenses it had that it was working for us. Imagine how stupid you'd have to be to think that, I just vote for a person, and then they go and they represent me to the government, and, they're making decisions based on my behalf and in my interest. Ha! It's beyond laughable. That's how it works if you're AIPAC. Well, not if you're an American citizen. Elite theory is obviously true, and we can see it everywhere we look, and we can't unsee it. James Lindsay basically describes woke as this. The woke right is just like the woke left because it's attempting to explain how power works in the current day. Liberalism wants you to go back to sleep. It wants you to go back under its hypnosis. It doesn't want you looking around too much and questioning the shadows on the cave wall. It wants you to go back to sleep. The Matrix movie would have been much different if Neo just went back into his pod and hooked back up. But of course he did wake up because the system is broken. Morgoth wrote this great piece a couple years ago called The West, an Elephant on Stilts. It's a great article. He made a video for it as well. Here's an excerpt from it.
Implicit within a term such as bread and circuses is the understanding that a managerial elite will see to the affairs of state and that the masses should not concern themselves with pirates or inflation or a shortage of timber for the shipyards or that the crops failed. The idea was to keep the public in a somewhat childlike state of innocence while responsibility was outsourced to others. Western dissidents have spent years pointing out the ideological flaws and injustices of the West, its hypocrisy and double standards, its lies and its falsehoods and contradictions. In the last 5 years or so in particular, we witnessed a fraying of the fabric which binds the West together in an intellectual sense. Institutions were corrupt, science was corrupted, active policy was founded on falsehoods, and it was all increasingly obvious. This then in turn resulted in mass censorship, which is itself a betrayal of a core Western liberal value.
My point in bringing this up is that in a perfect world, we shouldn't be poking around and questioning the very foundations of what our society seems to be built on. But when everything starts to crumble, you can't blame people for searching for the truth. You don't get to call those people names if you're the one defending the system. And the toothpaste is out of the tube now, and we're not going to go away. All the cracks in the foundation, all the code violations we've seen and what the society was reformatted to, into the post-war consensus. Oh my God, we're using this term, which is a real thing, by the way, and the left brags about it. Well, that's something we can never unsee, and we're never going to let it go because this is our home. What else are we going to do? The most important quote I've ever come up with is that liberalism requires us to lie to ourselves and others about the very nature of reality in order to keep up the delusion. And if you start to look around and question things, the system gives you all these little retards. They pop up. Oh, it looks like you're writing a letter. Oh, it looks like you're being a little illiberal. They appear and they try to corral you back into your sleep pod. Oh, go back into the matrix and don't question what's going on. Of all the things I've pointed out so far, they are only there for the people who can see them. People who have eyes to see and ears to hear. The boomer way of thinking of people as individuals doesn't work here. Pattern recognition is key. As I've pointed out in a previous video, if you choose to view people in that way, you miss out on seeing how they behave when they're in groups. And that is a real thing. Life is an IQ test, and if you can't see the patterns in it, then you're not very bright. Or if you purposefully adopt a way of thinking that cripples your ability to see patterns because you believe it's racist or fascist to do so, then you are choosing to go through life with a low IQ filter on everything you see. We're not spawns of Satan with evil intentions. We're just noticing patterns. We've judged the content of their character 10,000 different times, and we've noticed some things. We went to the early life section of Wikipedia 10,000 different times, and we noticed some things. We read the Talmud on our own, and we noticed something. We've followed the money on 10,000 different issues, and we noticed things. We've made connections between people that we were never supposed to make, and now that our perception of our leaders and our institutions is ruined. The noticing and pattern recognition makes us dangerous because all the system can do is lie about reality. It's incapable of telling the truth about anything. The only way they can tell the truth is by saying it sarcastically, like Lindsay did when he accurately described what we believe. In that article he made where he pretended to be, he copied a bunch of Marxist rhetoric. He just copied the Communist Manifesto. And then he changed a couple words, 80-some%, and then he reposted it in this unknown conservative, publication. And he accurately described what we believe in there, but it's sarcastic. Oh yeah, there's this post-war consensus, and it's discriminating against white people, and oh man, they have it so bad. It reminded me of Bo Burnham's song, Straight White Male. There's a line in there where he says, "We used to have all the money and land. We still do, but it's not as fun now." That's James Lindsay's view of us. He doesn't see us as being legitimately discriminated against, but just struggling to adapt in our place in the new world of multiculturalism. Quit whining and do your part to go back to the 1990s. It's this resentment that goes back to the Reconstruction period. That we need to accept this new reality and quit fighting back. And our continued opposition, it drives them nuts. They spend their whole time thinking about how they're going to coerce us into roping us back in. Anyways, that's my response to the idiocy of James Lindsay. And hopefully you found something useful in all of that. If you enjoy this video and type of content I'm making, consider giving this video a like and maybe subscribing. It really helps. The algorithm really gets air under the wings of the video when you guys start liking and commenting. I will see you all in the next video. Peace.